and I see it as therapists as I'm working with them,
Yeah.
a lot of them are kind of keeping this container of I'm okay, but I'm not going to extremely excel and be who I want to be and be that superpower of ourselves. And we are our own superpower. And it's really letting ourselves be like, I can be my superpower because just being you is going to attract people who are like you. Like attracts like. And you're going to
Totally.
find your tribe by really being you. And you're
Yeah.
going to have a hell of a lot more fun in life doing that. But it's
Oh,
hard if that's not how you were brought up.
yes. We were brought up to really suppress the reality of things and dull your shine. I so feel that. It's been amazing to me too how many big problems can be solved after trying to tease them out and pull them apart and look at it from all angles. And the answer very often in the conversations I'm having with people, the coaching conversations or peer
Mhm.
conversations, is to be more yourself. Like lean more fully into you, and it resolves a lot of the stuff that's haunting people. It's the clarity in your business. Okay, well, if I can build a business around exactly who I am, the right people will easily come to me and I never have to try to be anything else. Like, how easy is that?
100%. Yes.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Neek. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. I have a confession to make. I hope that sharing this confession with you helps you to see that I'm truly walking the talk. So, just as I encourage therapy business owners that I coach to adjust their pace, tend to their needs, and make sure that they are running their business to add fulfillment to their life rather than having their business run their life, I do this too. Landy and I recorded this conversation almost exactly a year ago after the OTs and Pelvic Health Summit 2023. We were energized by being on a panel together at this live event and by the fact that we do similar work in different ways. We had this conversation and then life piled up, business piled up, and I had to slow down the pace of my podcast episode releases. I had recorded many episodes last spring and summer, and getting them out every 3 to 4 weeks was the pace I could handle. Here's the thing, that's okay. Actually, it's more than okay. It's why I started my business, so that I could be flexible and adjust to my needs, the needs of the people I love. Let me assure you, this conversation is just as relevant today as it was a year ago. In this episode, I sit down with Landy Peek, a success coach for OT and PT entrepreneurs. We dive deep into the unique challenges therapists face personally and professional. Landy and I share some different ways that we use our backgrounds as therapists in working with our coaching clients. We talk about somatic practices, acceptance and commitment therapy, and other ways we help therapists get unstuck. We also discuss the importance of balancing our professional responsibilities with personal well-being. How fitting. And the sometimes overlooked power of group support and shared stories in fostering growth. Landy opens up about her journey from occupational therapist to coaching, her move to Colorado, and the value she places on authenticity, bravery, and embracing one's true self. You'll hear practical strategies for tackling overwhelm and realigning with your values, as well as candid insights into the bravery it takes to step into something new. Whether you're a therapist, a coach, or someone on a personal growth journey, this conversation is filled with just the nuggets you need. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to introduce our sponsor, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR with a human touch. Whether you're switching your software or going paperless for the first time, the Jane team knows that the onboarding process can feel a little overwhelming. That's why with Jane, you don't just get software, you get a whole team. Jane's award-winning customer support is available with every subscription. You can contact them by phone, email, and chat whenever you need it, even Saturdays. You can also book a free account, set up consultation to review your account, and ensure you feel confident about going live. If you'd like some extra advice along the way, you can tap into their lovely community of practitioners, clinic owners, and front desk staff through Jane's community Facebook group. If you're interested in making the switch to Jane, head to jane.app/switch to book a one-on-one demo with a member of their support team. And don't forget to mention my code VITALITY at the time of sign up for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Landy, thank you so much for being here on my podcast. I've been looking forward to this.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to continue conversations with you because I absolutely adore talking to you.
I'm so grateful that we got to connect. Lindsay Vestal introduced us when we were preparing to be on a panel together at the OTs and Pelvic Health Summit in Phoenix, and it was so great to meet you in person.
I know it was so fun to have that virtual relationship and then actual in person. And that happened with a lot of people at that summit. So it's so neat to see people in full body and be able to have that interaction versus just Zoom. But
Yeah.
it was fun to be there on a panel together. And we had so many things that overlap
Yep.
in what we talk about and how we support people, but also such different viewpoints
Yeah.
around the same topic. So it's fun to just dive into those conversations.
Totally. And I think that's when we think about even therapeutic modalities, right? That quite often people need a variety of approaches to solve their problems. And similarly, you and I respect each other's perspective on things. We offer some different tools, and people could take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and mix it together in their own custom way. And that works.
Absolutely, because we each have our own different nervous system, different experiences. So we're going to be attracted to different types of modalities, different ways that we're working with people, different ways that we work with ourselves
Yeah.
and think and respond. And so, yeah, the more tools that you have, the more availability that you have to find something that works for you and then do more of what works for you and less of what doesn't. And that's really going to get momentum.
Well, first, tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So, Landy Peek, I am a success coach for OTPT entrepreneurs. And I'm also a mom of two and a chicken lover. I have backyard chickens.
You do.
Live in Colorado, love to hike and be outside, hiking, camping, all of that kind of stuff. I'm an OT by background. Started out as a peds therapist. And then after my second kiddo, transitioned to pelvic health to really support my own postpartum needs because I lived
Mm,
in a rural area without a pelvic therapist. So
right.
when I was struggling, I had the luckily degree that could get me the training to start helping my body.
Oh, smart.
In that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is magic." And fell in love with pelvic health.
Yeah.
In that journey, I realized the majority of my pelvic health clients were struggling with trauma and
Mhm.
so really dove into somatic experiencing to support my clients around trauma
Yep.
and began having other therapists say, "Ooh, can you work with me too on that? Oh, this is something that is really, I'm hitting a block. There's something I know that I want to do something different or shift, but there's a block here." And so really stepped big into the mental health and then stepped into coaching from there. So it's been a lovely journey as each step has built upon the next to get me where I am today.
I love that. So currently, your OT clinical practice isn't active. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, I moved to Colorado a year ago
Yep.
and in the move decided not to start a new clinical practice as my coaching business was really overtaking my time and I only want to work during school hours.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking to expand past that because I love my family time as well. So this gave me that great balance. And I absolutely love working with the therapist. There's so much fun
Yeah.
and it's just really neat to be able to see the really monumental shifts people make in their lives. As
Mhm.
you're working with a therapist, their nervous systems are at a different level than in that acute, something is wrong with my body area. And so
Mhm.
we go further, we go deeper, there's bigger transitions, and there's that ripple effect of supporting the therapist who then is supporting all of those clients who are then impacting their community and their families. And it's like, whoa, this is huge. So
Mm.
it's really fun working with a therapist.
I love working with therapists too because there's a difference in a mental health client that's coming to you. Perhaps they're funded in some way for your service,
Mhm.
or somebody told them they should see you or have to see you in some cases. In my work with return to work stuff, and it's a different game when it's a therapist who's invested, right? That they're actually putting money on the table to say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I am doing okay. I'd like to do better." And they're just like they run with it, and that's really exciting.
It is, and it's that sweet spot where as a, clinical therapist, I was working with people who were struggling to get to that place where they were okay.
Yeah,
And so they're at that survival, like, "I'm finally feeling like I'm surviving." That
yeah.
next level in that coaching is the survival to thriving. It's, "I'm good and I want great." And it
Yes.
is, and it's that difference in they really want this
Yeah.
because this is something that they see as a value and it's going to shift things in their life instead of like, I really need this because I just can't function.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that
yeah.
next step is just fun to work with. Yeah.
What do you think about because the work of helping the people who are in survival mode, who are
Mhm.
trying to get to okay, is really important. And it's rewarding, and we pull out a whole different set of tools for those
Mhm.
people. And I still see them, and I'm really glad I do. But there is that sense, like, I think, I don't know, maybe it's my own perception or my own kind of little nag in the back of my head, but that sense that, are you really doing the real work of making a difference if you're only working with these people? I know I have a way that I conceptualize that and feel really
Mhm.
good about it, but what are your thoughts on it?
Um, really excited to hear you bring that up because it's like, oh, I'm not the only one that has struggled with it. And as I've helped my own coaching clients step into coaching or different ways to serve people, it is a common thing when people do come with this. I mean, I was working with significant trauma before I stepped into coaching, and I was doing it just like you. I had a private practice and I had a coaching practice, but you're working with people who really, really need help and are really struggling. And I had a huge value in that is actually serving.
Mhm,
And how can I be serving if I am working with somebody that doesn't desperately need my help?
mhm,
This is that I want the icing on the cake. I want my life to be better, but it's already good.
mhm,
How do you justify stepping into that?
mhm.
And for me, it was looking at that ripple effect. It was
Yes.
looking at in helping the therapist, I have a greater impact in the world
Mhm,
than if I am helping that client because I have my caseload of therapists, and each of those therapists then have a caseload of their own clients, and they're also in the community, and they have a family. And so you're impacting this huge network then being that clinician that is supporting therapists versus the one-on-one, and both have value and
mhm.
both are needed, but
Yes.
I really allowed myself to step into, I am creating a bigger ripple effect supporting that therapist, and also knowing that that therapist does need a lot of support
Mhm.
because as therapists, we have a lot of stress. We have
Yes.
a lot riding on our shoulders, and many of us are stepping into our caseloads and we are holding space and we are holding that healing energy for our clients, which is a lot. And then we are also holding space for our families and being in our communities. And you look at, like, wow, the typical therapist has a lot going on in their life and they need someone to support them. And
Yes.
that was a big shift is like, okay, they really do need someone to support them. And being that support and seeing what that support does with my coaching clients is phenomenal. Where it's like, okay, I now can help hold 10% of that load for that therapist. And they can then step in and do something bigger or different, or even see things differently. Because most of my coaching is asking questions. I had a client earlier and she really was coming up against a problem. And I said, okay, it's like looking at the trunks of a tree. Like all you see is the trunk. It feels very big. It feels like you're stuck. What if you just shift and look from an eagle's view? You're still looking at the tree. You're just looking at a different perspective. And just putting that out there, she was like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
new point of view. And she came up with it, but it was just that guidance or shift that is so big. So
Mm.
I'm curious as I turn the question to
Yeah, yeah.
you.
Yes.
What is that justification in really supporting the therapist? How are you seeing that value and stepping into that?
It's very much the same. It's the ripple effect. And I work in mental health as well. And so there's that sense that I have felt the weight of holding tenderly and holding space empathetically for people's most painful experiences. And that can, as much as we have boundaries and things like that, it can still feel really heavy. It's a lot of responsibility. And I cherish the honor. I am grateful for it, but it also allows me to do it in just that right amount, that I don't have to spend all day, every day doing that, that I can do the amount that is sustainable for me and my mental health. And I can have that ripple effect with the therapists who are going out and impacting the world, especially in this kind of COVID. I don't even think we can say post-pandemic at this point. I think all the numbers are picking up again, but there's just been so much stress and so much change. And I found too that a lot of my friends, a lot of my therapist friends, OTs, PTs, psychologists, they held it together pretty well through the crisis part of the pandemic, that first kind of year or two.
Mhm.
And it was sort of as we were in 2023 that the wheels started falling off because we all went running in. We're helpers, right? Running in,
Absolutely.
we're going to help. And then that just became not sustainable, right? Our nervous systems aren't set up for persistent, ongoing stress. We're set up for acute periods of stress and
Mhm.
recovery. And so I found that, yeah, a lot of people's mental health, a lot of therapists' mental health have been struggling more in the last several months, and they need us now more than ever.
Absolutely. And just bringing in that light that if you are struggling, it's
Mhm.
really common. And
Yeah.
we don't talk about the struggle. I think, too, as therapists, we have this set that we need to be the leader, we need to be the guide, we need to be okay so
Mm.
that we can support those that are not okay. And we don't always talk about it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And you can still support others. Like you can have your whole freak out. You can feel stressed and still be there for others and strengthen. And it makes you more human
Yeah.
and it makes you more relatable. And absolutely, it is important to get that support so that you can continue supporting without burning out. Because that's a
Yes.
huge part of burnout is really going full in and not listening to what your own needs are.
I remember I was sitting in my own therapist's office one day and she was in problem solving mode. She was like, well, what if you did this? And what about that? And what about this? And I was sort of in, well, yeah, I don't think I could, like, that's workable for me right now. Or I don't think I can, logistically, I can't, like, I've got a lot of responsibility. I can't drop things and go do what you're suggesting or
Mhm,
what have you. And then she gave me a coaching question and it was like, okay, no problem. Like, I get it. What are
mhm.
you willing to do in order to keep doing the work you do, in order to be able to keep doing the work that you do? And I was like, mic drop, right? Like, in order for me to keep going, I need to choose something. And it's an interesting kind of shift from solver to coach to kind of go, yeah, so how are you going to solve this problem? I'm
Mhm.
here to help you, but there's this go or no go spot. And it's your responsibility without saying it like that.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yes, absolutely. I had a client that was I mean, she's an incredible human being and she's doing so much for her community, but she's doing so much. And so she was really stressed and she's a physiotherapist. And so I said, okay, let's put everything on the plate. What do you all have on your plate right now? And how heavy does that feel? She's like, oh my gosh, it's so heavy. What can go? And she's like,
Mhm.
nothing. I'm like, okay. And 2 weeks later, she Voxers me because I use Voxer in my coaching, and she's like, "Okay, I get what you're saying, and I now know what needs to go." And there was the wants and the needs, and she wanted to do all of this big community outreach, but looking at that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so what can we pare back? And instead of, like, taking things necessarily off the plate, we also can shrink the plate. So you can still do some, but not at the biggest capacity that you can do. It's like, when you're going to a buffet, you're gonna smaller plate, you're gonna still enjoy everything, but you're not gonna overwhelm yourself.
Yeah.
Same thing in life. Let's shrink the plate a little bit or see
Mhm.
what needs to come off if that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's those questions that turn back, I think, are so powerful when you, as the client, as the person who is looking to change your life, is coming up with the deep answers. But you
Yes.
need someone else asking those questions so that you have a shift of perspective. And that's why I
Yeah.
have a therapist. It's why I have a coach,
Yep.
because I need somebody asking me those too.
Totally.
And I
Totally.
also need someone like when things are feeling big and heavy to
Yeah.
go, okay, this is okay. It's totally like common to have all of this stress coming in.
Mhm.
But what do you need to shift? How do you need to look at it different? How are you not stepping into the person that you want to be? A lot of my work is you have to have that identity of the person that you want, the life you want to create before you
Mhm.
create it, or you're just going to keep creating those same patterns that you have. So my coach is asking you those same questions. And are you being that person that you want to be?
Mhm.
And in what ways are you not? And that's like the aha moments of like, oh, okay, I
Mhm.
really want, and I say I want whatever it is, but I'm not stepping into that. I'm not being having that self-integrity for my word of even working out. I'm going to get up and work out every day.
Mhm.
If I don't, then I'm not being integral to my word. So it's like, okay, if that's my goal for the next morning, even if it's 10 minutes, I'm going to make sure I do that. And that's the shift. But it's somebody tapping into and asking you those questions so that you can get a better idea of what's going on inside of you.
I like that. I wanna get go back to this being
Yeah.
thing, but first I wanted to say I love the plate analogy because I find that a lot of the therapists I work with, like therapists who've chosen to become entrepreneurs, tend to be pretty ambitious, right? They tend to be achievers. They've got things they wanna do. They've got brilliant ideas and things to share with the world, and it's hard to see that they can't do it all at once, and so there's that sense of, yeah, you can do it all. It's just maybe not all right now, like in this
Exactly.
season, which things can you do? And so often there needs to be some sort of boundary set. And I know for me, it often is I do not work on Fridays. So that's one boundary. And I don't work after 4. That's another boundary. Sometimes I'll work a long, long day starting early, but being able to kind of shrink the plate that, okay, well, if it has to fit in, it has to fit in here. There's no more
Mhm.
room.
And also that self-discovery of
Yeah.
like, I talk so much about planting the seed, and that's a job. I think it's a job as a therapist and it's a job as a coach is to plant those seeds and allow people to come and to let those ideas grow at their own space and place. Because if you're not ready, you're not going to hear it. If you're not ready, you can't push somebody into something. And looking as a therapist working with clients, if you have a client that's just not making progress, sometimes it's that identity of I am hurt or broken, and I get something from that. I get support from family. I get empathy from family that maybe I haven't gotten before. So maybe I subconsciously don't want to let that go.
Mhm.
And they hold on to that. So they don't do the homework and they don't do the things that we want them to do and they don't make progress because subconsciously they're getting something from that space of being hurt.
Yeah.
It's the same for us as therapists.
Yeah.
We cling to things because it's filling a need in some way, or it's filled a need in the past in some way. And we just haven't updated to get to, oh, this is no longer working in my life. It was really functional at one point, but it's no longer working. But
Yeah.
it takes that outside person to really plant that seed and say, I wonder if this is still working for you. I wonder if you are getting some benefit from being in this space, even though you say you want that change.
Mhm.
What are you getting from being here? Because we're getting something if we're staying in that same space.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at it that way, then it's like, oh, okay, this is okay. It is giving me something.
Yeah.
It's okay to side note, it's not functional anymore.
Yeah.
But then you have a lot of empathy for yourself instead of berating yourself for not getting up and working out. It's like, oh, what is this giving me? This is giving me something. That's okay. I can be soft and kind to myself. And then I can decide to shift when I'm ready.
So how do you approach that with people where there's this an outdated operating system that keeps kind
Mhm.
of peaking up and this thing that goes way back? You don't even believe in it anymore. You don't even agree with it anymore. You don't want it as part of how you're operating. You do everything to try
Yes.
and not be that person. Often it's around worthiness or often money too. So that sense of, well, you just have to work a little harder than everybody else, right?
Mhm.
How do you help people with those things where it's not at the forefront? They don't actually believe it anymore, but it's just an old pattern that keeps creeping back.
Yeah. So working with the subconscious,
Yeah.
and our subconscious creates something like 95% of our reality.
Yeah.
And it is because it's coming back to that old programming. And let's see if I can think of the stat now. But I think the subconscious creates your answer something like 7 seconds before your conscious brain creates that answer. So if you have a problem you're looking at, your subconscious has already figured out the answer before you've rationalized through it.
Yeah.
And that's why we have all that old patterning coming back up because we're responding to the subconscious, even though we can consciously go, okay, this should be this, and this is going to be this, and then I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that inner identity to back what your conscious brain is creating,
Mhm.
you're going to derail to that subconscious pattern and those old life patterns. So when I'm working with clients, I'm really getting curious about what are those patterns. And so we're diving into what are those subconscious beliefs and patterns so that
Yeah.
we can identify them and be really clear on, oh, I think this is still here.
Mhm.
And then there's a couple different ways that I work with clients, and it depends on the client's nervous system.
Yeah.
It depends on w- who they are and what they like. So, whether it's diving into some hypnosis or some rapid resolution therapy or going back and doing some inner child work, it really depends on what's coming up with the client and what feels good. Because I've had clients that are like, I'm not open to hypnosis. We're not going to go there because you're not going to get benefit if it's not something that feels safe and comfortable.
Yeah.
And so it's looking at coming to what are those outdated beliefs? And then who do you want to be in this life that you want to create? So if you want to be an entrepreneur, but you are a therapist now and your identity is a therapist, you have to shift to I see myself as an entrepreneur. I see myself as a business person. I see myself as a marketer. I see myself in all of those roles and I have that inner identity. Or you're going to keep working as a therapist, banging your head, trying to create a business, but you're
Mhm.
not thinking like a business owner. So I'm looking at the subconscious beliefs that are just the blocks for the specific things they're looking at. Because we can go through and look at all of our programming and we'll get lost in the programming and
Sure.
go, oh my gosh,
There's a lot of stuff in
really?
there.
Do I
It'll
have
be
to go through
dove
this? And I think sometimes in therapy, we go there where we start going down, oh, well, this is an issue and this is an issue and this is issue. But is that issue really impacting where you want to go?
Right.
Because you can let that old programming just be there if it's not impacting what you currently want to do.
Yeah.
So it's finding the subconscious beliefs that specifically are blocking that progress that you want to make, knowing who you need to be, and then working backwards to talk to the subconscious and say, oh, how are we going to shift this? What is that outdated story? And sometimes it's as simple as, I don't want to say logically, but showing the story and the pattern to the person and kind of those thought busters as you're coming through. And sometimes it's coming through, and sometimes it's even using a story of someone else
Yeah.
and saying they can look at it through somebody else and go, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then link it back to them. And they're like, oh, well, if it's ridiculous for them, it's ridiculous for me too. And then you can shift it. So there's so many ways to really shift that subconscious belief. And it really comes down to the person and how we're going to tackle it. So how about
I
you?
love
How do you shift it?
Well, I love that last bit you said there about telling the story of someone else, and I definitely find that the power of my group. So I've got a
Yes.
group of therapists who are working together, and sometimes they show up on a call just going, I don't know why I needed to be here, but I'm here today and I don't have a question. I don't have a problem to bring to the
Mhm.
table. But then they hear somebody else's story and go, hot damn, that was what I needed to
100%.
hear. Yeah.
100%. This just I also have a group, and this just happened in one of my groups where the client, she's like, "I said maybe 3 words the whole time, but my world got rocked just listening to what this other person had to say." And I have found our deepest, darkest secrets, the things that we think are like, "Oh my gosh, nobody can know about this," are the most common struggles. And when we start diving into and you hear that there is social healing as we are going through and hearing other people's stories, we sometimes connect the dots within ourselves that we never would have connected if we had not heard that story. There is that power in that group. But absolutely, sometimes sitting and hearing, you're like, aha, and this now makes sense. And I've got it. And let's shift it,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't have gotten there if you hadn't heard it. And I think that's such a powerful thing in group. And I think as therapists, sometimes with our clients, we're not really valuing the group. We're so into it needs to be one-on-one. And we lose sight of that social healing and having that value of being able to not only hear, I'm not the only one, but hear a different perspective that connects so deeply to yours. You're like, ah, that makes sense. And I can shift it because I've heard someone else go through it.
Yes. And you can see people who are a little further down the road in their transformation. You can see how people are practically implementing these things,
Yes.
which ways that like even we've had great conversations in my group around setting boundaries in your auto reply on your email. And people are like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought to do that." But sort of just
Right.
giving yourself space to go, "Hey, I don't reply right away."
Exactly. And it's huge, but those boundaries are huge.
Yeah.
And I think there is that lovely journey that you get to watch,
Mhm.
and you see those people that are just a few steps ahead of you.
Yeah.
If I want to grow my business to that level, if I
Yes.
want to do this in my life, I start watching for those role models and start really analyzing, okay, so what are they doing? How
Yeah.
are they interacting with the world? And I think in those nice groups, you have more of that visibility instead of like social stalking somebody. You have that ability to say, okay, so how are you doing this? And what does this look like? And as this is unfolding, and then you also have the resource of that person within the group that you can ask questions and they can give you that encouragement and say, oh my gosh, I was there 3 months ago
Yeah.
and this is how it unfolded for me. And it gives you that constant motivation that you can do it. That this is, you see someone else and you're like, and I always believe if the universe shows you something, it's not to make you jealous, it's to say, see, it's for you too. You can do this too. Somebody else did this. And within that group network, you
Mhm.
get to see that and say, okay, this is possible for me too because they did it. And you have some, I think, more rapid growth
Mhm.
because you have those visuals and all of the other sensory stuff that comes in and just being with other humans that
Totally.
really supports your own growth.
Yeah, for sure. So you were asking me actually how I
Yeah.
address some of those things where that little
Yep.
ghost comes back up to haunt you and you're like, I thought I was done with this.
Yes.
And I love what you were saying there too, because I do quite often approach it from more of okay, that can come up,
Hmm.
but you still get to choose your action. And so it aligns more with how do I need to be? How do I need to show up? How do I
Hmm.
so what's important here? What's my value? Yep, I can
Yes.
have this little niggly thought come up and go, yeah, right. Okay. Thanks the ghost of Christmas past or whatever you
Hmm.
want to call it. I'm going to choose my action anyhow. Like that kind of that thought coming up or that emotion
Hmm.
coming up doesn't need to control my behavior. And so I work with
Yeah.
people using a lot of acceptance commitment therapy
Hmm.
act to unhook from those things so they're not controlling our behavior,
Yeah.
and people can make values aligned choices in their actions. And I think, though, there's also an element of that unconscious that ACT doesn't address. And
Hmm.
so I know for me, I've got all the ACT tools in the world and I don't get too hooked by those things. But man, I'd like them to not keep coming up and getting in the way before I notice them or that sort of thing. And so I love how you're talking about addressing the meta nervous system level. Yeah, talking about somatic experiencing, or I do accelerated resolution therapy as well, but I haven't incorporated it in coaching. So that is
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah. Which for people who don't know, there's an eye movement, kind of a cousin of EMDR, working at this at a nervous system level
Yep.
where you can reprogram some of those stories or images in the case of ART, but hadn't thought to bring it to my coaching.
Yeah, it's so fun. And I love how you tap into values.
Mhm.
I have a huge module and focus in my group program around values because one of the biggest trip ups in my personal and professional life was I was trying to work and create a business that was misaligned with my values.
Mm.
And so it is now such a thing that I bring awareness to. So one of my big values is freedom. And I like to have my own freedom and my own choices. And I don't like to be contained and told what I wanted to do or what I should do.
Mhm.
Motherhood was a huge challenge for me because I lost a lot of freedom because you have this little being that you no longer can, even shower on your own schedule. So it was like, oh my gosh. And then I'm trying to grow a business and I'm not doing the actions that I knew would help me because I felt like if I took that step, I would lose more freedom. And since I was growing my business, really when I was starting into motherhood, I had two things that felt like they were taking my freedom. And so, in being aware of like, oh, this is a huge value. How do I, A, support myself as a mother in getting myself freedom? Babysitters were huge. I hired a nanny
Yeah.
that I love and trust, and my kids still talk about her. But it gave me space where it wasn't just work hours, it was I can have some me hours that she can cover too. And then in my business, growing it so it really, tuned into my values in that I was looking at how can I create a business that gave me freedom? And when I was feeling blocked, coming back to, is this butting up against one of my values? And if it is, what can I do to shift it so that either the business shifts or I look at, is this value still aligned with who I want to be? And I can look at, do I need to reprioritize my values? But I love that you tap into it because I think it's a hidden blocker for so many therapists. And if we're not in tune with our values, we continually hit up against the wall and we're not looking at, oh, this is why. And sometimes it's such an easy shift,
Yeah.
but we never see it.
Totally. So often when a person it feels really reactive to a situation, it's because it's highlighting a value that's being compromised.
Mhm.
And trying to figure out how to do the opposite of that. Stop reacting so you can pause and slow
Yeah.
down the reaction so you can figure out what it is. What's that feeling there to tell you? That's
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think the biggest reactor for a lot of parents is that respect.
yeah.
And I need to be respected. And then when you feel at all disrespected and in personal lives with partners and parents and all of that, then it has that big reaction. I'm angry because I don't feel respected. But it's what is this? What am I really upset about?
Mm.
Is it that I'm not being respected or is there something bigger or different in line?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so what am I? And this is one of the things I really talk with my clients around is looking at what's coming up. And I had a client who did a really lovely big public speech. And she said she was walking out the door and she had huge wash of anxiety.
Mm.
And as she had this wash of anxiety, she stopped and she's like, I heard your voice in my head. And
Mhm.
I turned and I said, what is this? Because I think that's such a key question to say, okay, so I'm being reactive. What is this first? But as she sat there, she's like, oh, this is a huge thing of anxiety. She's like, there's excitement though in there
Mm.
because I just did this big speech and there's a lot of energy that's coming from that. There's also the fear of judgment because I just did this big speech and what are people going to say about me now? And then she just pulls out all of this thing that she'd lumped as anxiety. And she's like, oh, wow, there's such a mix. She's like,
Yeah.
just being able to sit there and go, oh, this is all it is. She's like, then I
Mm.
could walk out and I didn't spin my wheels and go into, oh my gosh, all that judgment and everything that kind of comes up sometimes when we put ourselves out there. Instead, it's like, what is this? And what's really underlying that? And then you can start deciding, is this something I want to shift or not?
And don't you find that there's that work first too for a lot of people of a negative feeling, I must erase it, I must avoid it, I must turn away, I must distract, all bad
Yes.
feelings are bad, I'm gonna make that feeling go away, and if we can't sit with the feelings and get curious, can't
Mhm.
sit there and turn toward them and start to go, "Oh, what's actually here?" It's uncomfortable, especially
Uh-huh.
if you have a lifetime of avoiding feelings,
Yes.
but it's so key to be able to sit with it and get really curious and feel it all. That is hard work, but it's important.
It is hard work, but also knowing that it's okay to sit with all those feelings because a lot of us grew up where it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay to be sad. It's not okay to, to be jealous about
You
something.
should be more positive.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, yes. And then my little guy's in kindergarten. So, the you get what you get and you don't get upset. I'm like, oh wait, no, we get upset.
Yeah,
You
we
don't
get
have to throw a
upset.
fit over it, but we get upset. And
Yeah,
that's okay. It's okay to feel that. And that's what I want both as a clinical therapist and a coach, you to feel the breadth of emotions
yeah,
because that's human. That is ideal is to be able to feel all the way down to the sadness and all the way up to the bliss
yeah,
but that neither one of them takes over, that you
yeah,
have that flexibility,
yeah,
that if you go down to a deep sadness, you swing back up and you allow yourself go, oh my gosh, this is crushing.
yeah,
But then it's temporary and your nervous system can pull you back into, okay, I'm regulated, those ups and those downs. Same with the bliss. We want you to go into those high spaces and feel so incredibly amazing. But I also want you to be able to regulate and come back down without a crash. Because
mm,
sometimes we hit the high of the highs and then we have that huge crash. And it's where we withdraw and we're like, oh my gosh, I did too much. And whatever it is that's coming up,
yeah,
but we want to have that flow. And that flexible flow is ideal, but we're not taught to have that. We're not taught that it's okay to have that. But we
Mm.
want to really come into it's okay to feel, it's okay to cry, it's okay to be upset, and it's okay to be happy. That was a hard one for me is to allow myself to really be like, oh my, I see this a lot in therapists. Oh my gosh, life is amazing because I wanted to tamp it down because I don't want to hurt somebody else that is having a hard time by being ecstatic and having a really amazing life. And so I was toning down my whole existence to try to be more empathetic to
Approachable.
someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And I heard a quote and I have no idea where I heard it, but you can't be poor enough to make the poor rich.
Mm.
And it was in a financial thing, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that emotionally. I'm trying to keep myself so contained, and I can't keep myself contained enough
Mhm.
to make someone who is really depressed or somebody who's going through a really traumatic event happy.
Mm.
I can be happy and be in a better space to support them, but
Yeah.
bringing myself low is not going to make them happy. And I see it as therapists as I'm working with them.
Yeah.
A lot of them are kind of keeping this container of I'm okay, but I'm not going to extremely excel and be who I want to be and be that superpower of ourselves. And we are our own superpower. And it's really letting ourselves be like, I can be my superpower. Because just being you is going to attract people who are like you. Like attracts like. And you're going to
Totally.
find your tribe by really being you. And you're
Yeah.
going to have a hell of a lot more fun in life doing that. But it's
Uh,
hard if that's not your how you were brought up.
yes, we were brought up to really suppress the reality of things and dull your shine. I so feel that. It's been amazing to me too how many big problems can be solved after trying to tease them out and pull them apart and look at it from all angles. And the answer very often in the conversations I'm having with people, the coaching conversations or peer
Mhm.
conversations, is to be more yourself. Like lean more fully into you and it resolves a lot of the stuff that's haunting people. It's the clarity in your business. Okay, well, if I can build a business around exactly who I am, the right people will easily come to me and I never have to try to be anything else. Like, how easy is that?
100%. Yes.
Right?
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's huge. Just it's hard and it's scary to be your authentic self because at least my upbringing, there was that like community judgment. You better be this type of person and not act out because the whole community's and I grew up small town. So like the whole community did know what I was doing. If I skipped school, it got home before I got home. So there was that sense of everybody's watching everybody. So it's hard sometimes to be your authentic self because it feels scary, because it feels like, are people really going to love me and value me if I am authentically me? Yes, stepping into your authentic self is absolutely going to resolve things. But it's also a really scary journey sometimes. And so just knowing that and knowing that there's people that will walk beside you and keep cheering you on and keep planting seeds and keep asking questions to make that journey easier is huge.
So good. Yeah, there has to be a sense of coming to love and respect yourself
I
as
think
you are.
oh my gosh, I think that's yeah, nail on the head. That is number 1,
Yeah.
is you have to value you,
Yeah.
and once you value you, there is a point where you do just stop caring, not in a bad way and like, I really don't care if I piss people off, but in I don't have that sense of judgment hanging over me anymore. I really just want to be me and just do the things that I want to do in a supportive way. I had the conversation in my group the other day where I had said that to someone, and she's like, "Oh, but I can't do that because I want to be a good mom. And part of being a good mom and being a good therapist is watching out for somebody else. I can't just wholeheartedly live my life for me." It's
Mm.
like, no, we're not like ignoring everybody else and just like bulldozing through.
Yeah.
Part of standing up and living your life for you and being your authentic self is if you're already kind, you're going to amplify being kind. If you
Mhm.
already have those traits, you're not erasing those. You're just peeling off all of the layers of bullshit that have been put on
Mm.
and allowing you to truly be you. So we're not changing you. We're just letting go of all the stuff that's no longer serving you so that you can be you. And
Ugh.
you don't have to worry about somebody not liking you. You're just going to amplify you. And I think
Yeah.
that's huge is to give the permission of like, you're not going to turn people away. And you might because they might not be aligned with you anymore, but those aren't people in your tribe anyway. But the people who absolutely adore you are still going to be there and excited to see as you bloom even more.
Oh, I love that. This brings up a question. So, in the coaching industry,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things I don't like in the non-therapist coaches. A
Yes.
lot of the way they can use mindset work in a manipulative sort of fashion that
Mhm.
really bothers me.
Yep.
Gets my nervous system all riled up because it's taking away from safety. I've been on sales coaching calls where it's like,
Mhm.
well, your program is not overpriced. It's that they don't see the value. They don't value themselves enough. And I see that at times where a person isn't valuing themselves enough to
Mhm.
invest in themselves. But sometimes it's a little bit weaponized too. So there's this sense of needing to believe in yourself enough to invest in yourself, to hire the coach, to join the group, to invest in the resources that you need to start that business. And I find that when there is that sense of self worth being problematic, that can sometimes come out in, well, that's too expensive or that sort of thing. And that's not to say that everybody can afford the top end coaching
Right.
programs. That might not make financial sense for some people at the
Mhm.
point that they're starting. But what's your experience with that?
Oh, yes, because I'm aligned with you and I do a no pressure sale. I'm not here to talk you into working with me at all. I'm here to say, this is how I can support you. And I truly do believe that it is my duty to share how I can support someone as a therapist, as a coach. You don't know if I can help you if I don't say I can help you.
Yeah.
It is then your choice whether you want to take that step or not. And you can, I don't think there is a tie to your self value and you valuing yourself and spending that money. I think there's fear there,
Yeah.
but I don't think, and I think there are coaches out there that use that. Oh, you don't value yourself enough to spend that money.
Yeah. It's manipulative.
It
Yeah.
is, and that's
Yeah.
BS because you
Yeah.
can
Totally.
100% value yourself. And I have sat in coaching calls with potential coaches and I'm like, no, I 100% value me. What I don't feel is aligned.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. If you are not, and I'm like, I want a hell yes for people that are going to work with me. If you're not, and I will flat out tell people, if you're not a hell yes, this isn't the right time. I'm not going anywhere. So come back and circle back. And I've had people circle back 3 years later
Yeah.
and be like, okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah.
But you're not ready. And it's coming, it's looking at your nervous system too. We're not going to push anybody to do anything they're not ready to.
Yeah.
Your nervous system isn't at that space to work. And there might be some subconscious things that are red flags. Maybe spending that money isn't feeling safe. That doesn't have anything to do with your value. That's not feeling safe. It's
Yeah.
okay for it not to feel safe. You'll come to a point where you're like, I'm going to risk this and I'm okay with that risk. That's where I want you to be.
Yeah.
Not, I'm going to push this and freak out
Yeah.
because you're not going to get the benefit of working together if you are freaking out over the money. It's not worth it. And in every single contract that I have with my clients, it is, this is not putting you at any financial risk. You are saying that this is okay. Because I don't want anybody to feel like they need to push themselves out of that box, risk financial to grow in different ways. You can continue to grow without putting yourself in any financial risk. 100%. There's a coach out there for you that will absolutely support you. You can do your own self work. Absolutely. There are going to be points in your life where you're like, no, I want this. And
Mhm.
because I want this, I'm ready to do a little bit of financial stretch. I'm ready to push myself a little bit, but I also know I'm going to get gain from this. And I
Mhm.
think that's the sweet spot when you're signing with a coach is that you want to have that confidence that yes, this might be pushing my boundaries. Yes, not boundaries as in that structure,
Yeah.
but in like, this is pushing my comfort zone. This is
Yeah.
pushing me out a little bit in growth. This is scary, but I'm also confident in myself that I can get that return on investment in whatever way that is, emotional growth or a financial growth. But 100%, if somebody's pushing you to sign and tapping into all of those little trigger points, that's
Mhm.
somebody to turn away from because if
Totally.
they're getting you in that way, they're going to coach you in that way too.
Yeah.
And you're not going to feel good and safe. Honestly, to grow, you have to feel safe. So it's why I work with the nervous system as well because we're creating that safety and then we're stepping in a pace. Each person I work with is on their own individual journey. Nothing is like cut and paste blanket across the board because your experiences in your nervous system are different from mine, are different from the other people in the program. So we have to take it step by step for you. So you don't freak out. Like that's the goal is you
Totally.
grow without the freak out.
Yeah.
Yes,
I love it. Thanks for sharing that.
absolutely.
I have a few questions I ask everybody.
Yeah.
Sidebar, we didn't get to one of the topics, but this was a perfect
But
conversation, I
this is
think.
a great conversation. So, like those organic things, this is what needs to come out. Uh,
Totally.
and it's the same, I think, in coaching and therapy is what we can try to be organized in our sessions and we can try to say, I'm going to hit this topic, but we're missing the boat. When we
Totally.
come in and say, okay, what is here? Let's work with this. We're going to nail it every single time. So
Yes.
this is perfect.
Yes. Perfect. Good. What does being brave mean to you?
I love that one. Being brave is doing the things that internally feel scary or intimidating, but consciously making that choice to do them. So you're not
Mm.
just pushing through, but you're saying, okay, it scares me. And oh my gosh, swinging back to when we met in person at the OTs for Public Health Summit, there were so many speakers that were speaking for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to this, I have this message, and I am so speaking in public because so much of us we have spoken so many times virtually,
Yeah.
but that live audience is different.
Yeah.
Uh, but they were all individually brave because they had a message they wanted to share. And even though it scared them to be up there, they were consciously choosing to share their message, even though it was scary. And I remember, and I can't even think of which speaker, but I remember one speaker there started and their voice was quavering.
Mhm.
And they were scared, but it didn't stop.
Mhm.
They kept speaking, they kept going, and their voice got stronger as they got through. That's bravery. And it's that conscious choice to step past something that intimidates you.
Yeah, and I think there's a beautiful thing in other people doing it with the quivering voice, other people doing it for the first time, other people messing up and losing
Mhm.
track of their notes because
Yeah.
it teaches everybody else that, "Oh, okay, so it doesn't have to be perfect because I totally valued what that person had to share even when they screwed up. Even maybe I even valued it more because they were being
Mhm.
so brave."
Oh my gosh, it's the human experience. And I
Yeah.
think we are craving as a society to see, especially with so much social media and everything looks perfect,
Yeah.
craving to see people be human because we are all human. And absolutely, I would bet that there were people in the audience that were listening to her and saying, I could do that too,
Yeah.
because she was so authentically brave.
Yeah.
And I think that's it is when we are authentically brave, even if we're doing it as our voice is shaking, even if we're doing it as we are feeling like that anxiety buzz through us, we are showing people that they can do it too. And it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be that you're completely perfect and you have this nailed.
No.
That opens the doors for more people to step out in different ways, more people to show their bravery, more people to change the world because of the humanness that we're showing.
Mhm. Mhm. Common humanity.
Absolutely.
What is something brave you've done recently?
Well, recently, let me think. Recently, just in the last year, speaking at the summit,
Yeah.
it was my second time speaking to a big group, and that's always intimidating when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm serving there. But also just in looking at how, oh my gosh, there's so many things. I moved to Colorado. That was really brave. Putting myself out there, choosing to shift in how I'm showing up in my business
Mhm.
is brave. Also, letting go of my practice has been brave.
Very brave.
Looking at that was a big one because I'm like, coming back to that initial conversation, what are people going to think? I remember
Yeah.
resisting telling one of my mentors because she helped me so much get into the public health world
Mm.
and get to where I was. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's she gonna think? And she's like, oh, this is fabulous. How do I support you now? But looking at some of those big conversations, I think are the brave ones where I'm stepping out of who I have typically been as a character
Yeah.
and stepping to something different and new. And those are all the brave moments. So it's a ton of ones that were big in the moment, but you look back and you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. It feels huge though when you're on that verge of not doing the
Yeah.
brave thing.
And you're like, oh my gosh, where am I gonna go? And that's a lot of it is just having that faith that you
Mhm.
step. One of my favorite quotes is we often stay stuck because we can see what we will lose with more clarity than we can see what we will gain. And it's
Mm.
Sandra Chuma. I have it literally on my board. Sandra Chuma said that. But I love that because you can see so much. We can see what we're going to lose. And that keeps us standing still. And it's so much scarier to look at what we're going to lose versus what we're going to gain.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true. It's this intangible thing we're moving toward in the future that's not
Hmm.
guaranteed, but we
Absolutely.
know that letting go it's I think of often letting go of the shore in order to swim or letting go of the
Yes.
side of the pool. You can't get to the other side of
Mhm.
the pool by holding on. And but if you
Exactly.
can't see the other side of the pool and you can see that you're letting go here, that is frightening.
It is really frightening. Absolutely. And there is that real sense of fear of loss. And sometimes I think as humans, we stay where we are because we like that predictability. We know, and our brains neurologically, our brains like the predictability. We like the rhythm. We like
Oh,
knowing what's coming next. And so
safety. Yes.
exactly, and
Yeah.
it's like, I can stay stuck here, but I know exactly what's going to happen. I know what my business is going to be like. I know what clients are gonna be like, but if I wanna step into something different, I have to let go of all of this safety to create that step into that something different, and, oh my gosh, I don't wanna let go of safety, and that's where having that support, having a coach is huge because they are that get to be that life preserver that says, okay, I'm going to catch you, I'm going to support you, and I can see the other side.
Yeah.
And then if you have someone that can see the other side and has helped other people across to the other side, okay, I can let go. And there's that self trust too of like, okay, I trust that I can do this too,
Yeah.
especially have somebody to support me. Then I know I can do this.
Mhm. How would you like to see OTs get a little more brave in the coming years?
Oh, own the skills that we have.
Mm.
I'll tap back into the summit because just as that came up, Tiffany Lee, who is absolutely phenomenal with the Public Health Summit, when she was presenting, she said, stop asking for permission for if we can do pelvic health.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, that's it. But that's the mindset of so many of us as OTs, me included when I first started, with we're not really owning our own skills, but we're almost asking permission like, can I step into mental health? Absolutely. Mental health is our background. This is how we got started. Can I step into pelvic health? Can I step into other areas of practice? Can I step into coaching? We're asking, can I? Versus, I'm doing this. And I have been a firm believer of like, do and ask for forgiveness
Mhm.
for a long time. But we need to step into that area where you know your skills and your skill set is phenomenal as an OT.
Yes.
And it might be that if I went from peds therapist to pelvic health. So whole new skill set, but I wasn't starting over. I wasn't a brand new therapist. I had 10 years of work with people and more than that before I became an OT. All of my skills in working with peds transferred to pelvic health because I'm working with humans.
Yeah.
I'm working in, and I have so many different ways that I can tap into how my therapeutic self and that relationship and all of that. So own what you have, really be proud and stand in that space as an OT. And you might be new to an area but you're not a new therapist. And even if you're a new therapist, you're not new in working with people because I guarantee if you're stepping into OT as a human, you have worked with other humans because you wouldn't be attracted to this work if you didn't work with other humans. So really own what you have and then look at, okay, so what's that next step? And come to the table in what can I learn and what can I give? Because even if it's just an energy and a excitement, you're still giving something.
Awesome. So if people want more of you, how do they find you? What would you like people to do right now?
Oh, you can always find me on Instagram and Facebook at Landy Peek. I'm pretty easy to find there. And then I have Landy Peek, PEEK.com for my website. And then I will also give you a link to my freebie. What I love, it's a worksheet that will work you through your thought shift. And so it'll literally walk you through the process of who do you want to be? What circumstances are you currently working from? Because that's huge. So many of us are working from a set of circumstances, but they're often stories
Mhm.
and not absolute fact. And so, what circumstances, what thought block is coming up? And so it's just a way that it'll ask you questions to go through and
Awesome.
start planting the seeds to shift. So I'll give you the link to that, and then you can get that freebie
Awesome.
and be able to tap into just what are some of my blocks and who do I need to step in to be to create whatever I want to create.
Mm, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here. This
Oh,
has been a
thank
great
you.
conversation. Yeah.
This has been awesome.
I try to have shorter conversations. It never works out. We go too deep.
This is some deep, yeah, kitchen conversation. Absolutely, 100%. Well, thank you. I so appreciate your time.
I hope the power of seeking support when you need to break patterns that are keeping you stuck rang clear, whether it's through therapy, coaching, group coaching, and mastermind, or simply allowing yourself to feel and process your emotions. If you'd like to connect with Landy, you can find her on Instagram and Facebook at Landy Peek or visit her website, landypeek.com. Now, I'm not sure if you heard, in June, as part of my adjusting pace, I closed the door on entry to my signature program, Activate Vitality, which is a group coaching program for therapy business owners to help them thrive without the hustle. I am preparing to open the doors again after a pause on all of the sales and marketing stuff that goes with running such a business. So I am going to put a link in the show notes to book a call with me. I would love to talk to you if you are a therapy business owner who is looking for connection, community, collaboration, and co-regulation with a group of therapists who get it and who are trying to find their way in this lonely world of private practice. Thank you for listening. And as always, be brave, OTs.